they repeated that favorite line which says blood and water cannot flow together. It's very difficult for anyone to believe that terrorism has a connection with the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty unless it is India that weaponizes water. If we are harmed in any way by the Indus Water Treaty being held in abeyance, we will consider it an act of war. Indus Water Treaty is the most legally sound treaty between any upper riparian and lower riparian anywhere in the world. China has realized that it is important in our interest, in Chinese interest, for Pakistan to be their long-term friend. Whether it is to get access through the Belt and Road Initiative, CPEC and all that, or to encircle potential dangers. When nobody was willing to bring investments to Pakistan, it was only China that ended up with almost $35 billion worth of investments. The People's Liberation Army and the Pakistani military have the strongest relationship and the strongest cooperation that the PLA has with any other country. The president heard President Musharraf, and after a long pause, all he said was, when China wanted to make itself strong, what it did was, it put all its irritants, all its issues with neighbors on the back burner and focused on economic growth and strength. What, in my opinion, has given rise and has strengthened the military cooperation is the event in 2019 when they abrogated Article 370. We had committed to a bilateral engagement on our problems, no matter what they are. The incident in Pahalgam does not have any evidence that points to Pakistan. If their intelligence is so efficient, then how come they didn't know about the attack before it happened? How is it that nobody has ever been caught? There are a lot of people which at one time used to sympathize with India. They have now changed their opinions. You see, there are 2 or 3 things that have happened diplomatically. Before this incident, India was very keen to only discuss its problems bilaterally. And the rest of the world seemed to have accepted this in the light of the Shimla Agreement. But since the episode, before any attack, they said that they would hold the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. So among other things, in response, Pakistan said that we will also not respect the Shimla Agreement. The important point there was that we had committed to a bilateral engagement on our problems, no matter what they are. So in the past, there were many instances where India was irresponsible in its behavior, and technically, the International Committee should have taken notice of this. But because there was no big crisis, and because throughout they have been saying that our problems are going to be discussed bilaterally, there was no serious intervention from any side. There were certain people who lightly mentioned it, and they were quickly snubbed by the Indians, saying that this is not an international issue and we are going to discuss it bilaterally. The other thing that's happened from a diplomatic point of view, again, very early in the conflict, it seemed that the international community was not aware of the risks of this irresponsible behavior from India. And when I say the risks and the irresponsible behavior of India, it is very clear to me. One thing that I would like the audience and the international community to realize, we have to focus on one point. The incident in Pahalgam does not have any evidence that points to Pakistan. So there are 2 or 3 things that I want to highlight. First of all, there is a terrorist act in Pahalgam, which I would condemn, and my government has also condemned. But within 10 minutes, it seems that the intelligence community and the government of India knew that there was so-called involvement of Pakistan. Now, I would ask the question that if their intelligence is so efficient, then how come they didn't know about the attack before it happened? So that's one point. The second thing is, we offered publicly a neutral international inquiry, and we offered to cooperate on that. Why is it that India has ignored this and gone straight on the escalatory ladder towards a very, very dangerous conflict? The other point I want to make is, now imagine that these terrorists in Pahalgam attacked these people. There were 26 people, sadly, who were killed. And then they're supposed to have run away into the mountains. Now, you know that helicopters in the area and even drones in the area are equipped with what we call FLIR, forward-looking infrared. What that means is, if a person is running in the woods, the body heat can be traced by drones and by helicopters. How is it that nobody has ever been caught? So, considering this situation, it is very dangerous to take a step where two neighbors that are contiguous, their borders meet each other, and missiles can be exchanged not within minutes but in seconds. And the escalation can lead to very, very dangerous consequences. I would consider it was highly irresponsible of India that they started an actual skirmish and attacked Pakistan, actually announcing it. So we can discuss what happened later, but basically from a diplomatic point of view, the world has seen this, and there are a lot of people which at one time used to sympathize with India that have now moved their needles. I mean, they have now changed their opinions. So it is easier for our diplomats to say the things that I have said to you, to the rest of the world that they engage with, and convince them that this is irresponsible behavior, and it is a behavior that can endanger the global community. You see, there was a Greek historian and general called Thucydides. He lived in the 5th century before Christ, but his theory is called the Thucydides trap. And what he has basically said is, if a global or regional power is growing in influence and it tends to threaten the existing superpower, there is bound to be a clash at some stage between these two adversaries. Now, the United States sees this, and the United States has positioned itself through several alliances in South Asia, in the Indian Ocean, and mainly in the Asia-Pacific region. So they have an organization called the Quad, of which India is a part. It includes Japan, it includes Australia, and the United States. So this is clearly a threat to China and its security in the region. But basically, one of the other steps that the United States took is to change its support from Pakistan, traditionally, which was a 6-decade-old support, and to start to support India in the hope that they would create a sort of a buffer, or they would create a counter to the influence of China. Now, this is a grave error on their part for two reasons. One, I can assure you that the Indians are taking the US up the garden path. They are not sincere in their collaboration with the United States. But as long as assistance keeps coming, whether it's military assistance or it's economic assistance or it's foreign direct investments, they are willing to accept that. But notice that their trade of over $130 billion continues with China, and they are not foolish to actually take a direct conflict with China, because they know very well that it would not only destroy their economy, it would destroy them physically. So what I'm trying to say is, this is a situation which India is willing to accept as long as things are going their way. But as far as the actual alliance is concerned, the other thing I'd like to point out, that if you want to strengthen, if the US wants to strengthen India, it would include foreign direct investments. Now, it is in the interest of the United States to resolve the issues that are there in South Asia. Because if I am an American investor and I want to invest my hard-earned money into India, I will do due diligence. I will look at all aspects, all kinds of risks and all kinds of threats. So imagine me putting in $1 billion in an area which is a flashpoint, because there is an ongoing conflict where things can go badly wrong. And this recent episode, this recent problem that we've had is a clear demonstration of that. So what I'm trying to say is, if it is in your interest to bring investments into India, then it is also in your interest to make sure that the issues between Pakistan and India are resolved amicably. So that's an important point. Okay, now the recent speech by Prime Minister Modi after the ceasefire made a very important statement. Among other things that he said, they repeated that favorite line which says, blood and water cannot flow together. So at some point in this conflict, somebody has told the Indians that threatening to do away with the Indus Water Treaty would be a good way to cow down Pakistan, because if we stop their water, it would cause maybe famine or less production in Pakistan, and it would lead to pressure upon the government not to help in conducting acts of terror. But let me tell you where the intentions are suspect. In 2019, if you look at February, there was an incident in which they blamed Pakistan, the Pulwama incident. So there was a clash between us. It was thankfully short-lived. But at the end of it, what had happened was, again, there was a terrorist act. They blamed Pakistan and they attacked Pakistan. Okay? August of the same year, 2019, they abrogated the Article 370 and 35A. Now, you can see that there is a pattern to this. A similar thing has happened here, because they have been saying for more than a year and a half that we want to renegotiate the Indus Water Treaty. Now, the reasons that they gave in a letter to us, the reasons that they gave that they think the Indus Water Treaty ought to be renegotiated was that populations have grown. We have challenges of climate change. Climate has changed. We have we've made commitments to clean up the environment. And finally, they said terrorism plays a part in hampering the implementation of this treaty. Now, it's very difficult for anyone to believe that terrorism has a connection with the implementation of the Indus Water Treaty unless it is India that weaponizes water as a reaction to some act of terror that occurs in India. So there you can see the intentions. And then this incident comes about, the Pahalgam incident, and number one on the response is that we are going to hold the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. Now, let's look at what would happen if the Indus Water Treaty were held in abeyance and India wanted to hurt us, okay? First of all, we have made it clear that if we are harmed in any way by the Indus Water Treaty being held in abeyance, we will consider it an act of war. So we will have the right to respond to something like that, and we will have all kinds of options that are available on the table. Secondly, how practical is it for them to stop our water? They do not have large reservoirs on these three western rivers, Jhelum, Chenab and the Indus River. They have projects which are power projects, which are run-of-the-river projects. They are daily pondage projects. So they cannot store a lot of water to be able to manage that. And in order to make large storages, it could take them up to 10 years. So that's not practical in the near run, okay? But at the same time, what they can do is that they can release water at the wrong time and stop water at a critical time where, for example, we may need it for our kharif crop. So they can cause floods and all that. But these are of a very limited scale. The other thing that they can do is, under the Indus Water Treaty, they were supposed to share hydrological data with us. They have stopped doing that. That by itself can cause flooding, because if they don't tell us what's happening upriver, we may not be prepared for floods. As a result, we may not be able to take the right measures and people would lose their lives and their properties. So that is a very, very serious thing that can happen. But these are the results of this kind of weaponization, I should say, of water, which is a very, very serious issue, because the Indus Water Treaty has held since 1960, despite all the wars that we had. And the Indus Water Treaty is the most legally sound treaty between any upper riparian and lower riparian anywhere in the world. There are other treaties, but these are based on basic understandings under certain Geneva Conventions, that, the upper riparian cannot deny the rights of the lower riparian. So what I'm trying to say is, stopping water from flowing to a lower riparian is internationally considered to be a crime. You see, when you talk about your relations with other countries, they do not depend upon what a third party says or wants you to do. For many years, India has been trying to isolate Pakistan diplomatically, and especially since the Modi government came into power, this was a stated purpose to try and show the world that we are engaged in irresponsible behavior, that we harbor terror, that we promote terror, and therefore we need to be ostracized, we need to be isolated. They have not been successful in this at all, because the relations between countries depend upon their mutual needs and where their interests converge. So that is paramount in any relationship, and that is the reason that this effort has not been successful. Now, coming to our fair weather friends or our all weather friends, as far as China is concerned, China, when it makes a policy, its plan is between 50 to 100 years ahead. And the important thing is that their policies are consistent through thick and thin. They have had problems in Pakistan, but their policy, the basic aim and the implementation of those aims continues. And now, when I say consistency, the government in China is a consistent and strong government, and unlike changes, let's say, in the US government or even the Pakistani government, policies do not change with the change in government. So that's an important fact. China has realized that it is important in our interest, in Chinese interest, for Pakistan to be their long-term friend. Whether it is to get access through the Belt and Road Initiative, CPEC and all that, or to encircle potential dangers. If it considers India as an adversary, it is convenient for China that it has a presence and cooperation with one of the large neighbors of India. So those are the interests that converge. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, let me tell you that when I say through thick and thin, it is absolutely without doubt that China has stood by us through thick and thin. When nobody was willing to bring investments to Pakistan, it was only China that ended up with almost $35 billion worth of investments in CPEC alone. So that's one point. The other point, from the security point of view, if you do some research, you'll realize that the People's Liberation Army and the Pakistani military have the strongest relationship and the strongest cooperation that the PLA has with any other country. Even North Korea or Russia, the PLA does not have as strong and deep a relationship as it has with the Pakistani military. Having said that, Pakistan has not only helped China in its access to warm waters of the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, but Pakistan has also provided an opportunity for manufacturers of Chinese goods a proximity to the markets of the Middle East. So if an investor wants to export to the Gulf countries, they can make an industry, they can put up an industry in Gwadar or one of the special economic zones, and the cost of logistics and the risks of logistics will be much more reduced. So what I'm trying to say is, this is a marriage which benefits both sides. And a very clear demonstration of this has been seen in this recent skirmish that we have had with India. We can go into further details on that. They are very interesting details. But what I'm trying to say is, China, for example, if you go back to 2002, there was a time when again Indian and Pakistani forces were eyeball to eyeball and conflict was imminent. And at that time, President Musharraf flew to China to try to get advice and to try to get help. So I heard this from someone who was part of that delegation. And the way he described it, he said President Musharraf was speaking to the Chinese president and giving him Pakistan's point of view and complaining against India and talking about the dangers and the risks. And then he looked questioningly at the president of China, expecting him to say that this is the sort of help that we will give you if there was a conflict. Now in 2002, there was a long pause. The president heard President Musharraf, and after a long pause, all he said was, when China wanted to make itself strong, what it did was, it put all its irritants, all its issues with neighbors on the back burner and focused on economic growth and strength. So what he was trying to say is that Pakistan should be very careful, Pakistan should be more forgiving and more tactful, but it should concentrate on its economic growth and strength. Because everything comes from economic growth, whether it is our diplomatic clout or it is our military might. Because there's a big difference in the economy of India or the budget of India or the defense budget of India, which at last count was about $81 billion, and our budget, which is about $7.6 billion. So making yourself economically strong benefits you on both sides, diplomatically and militarily. Now, having said this, the difference this time is that China has come out openly and stated that they will not tolerate any threat to the territory, the territorial integrity of Pakistan. There was also a light mention of the consequences of weaponizing water. This is extremely important, and it's very, very different. And what, in my opinion, has given rise and has strengthened the military cooperation is the event in 2019 when they abrogated Article 370. This showed the intentions of the Indian government to what it wants to do in that area. So that's when you start hearing talk about us wanting to take back Pakistan occupied Kashmir, as they say about Azad Kashmir. There is this huge territory in Ladakh, Akaisan, which is in the possession of China rightfully. So now there is a much stronger alliance, and this has been demonstrated here. This is something which is unprecedented, and the whole world has been observing this very carefully. How is it that in the background, China has been able to assist us in a way that we have been able to keep a much larger neighbor at bay, and at the same time we have shown restraint along with showing our strength?